So, my name is Michael Bayer, and I'm the Director of Evangelization and Adult Formation at St. Clement in Chicago. And I'm here with Professor, Dr. Parishioner John Halloran. John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is John Halloran. I am professor, doctor, kind of. I have a PhD in social service administration from the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. And I'm a professor at Lewis University. It's a small Catholic college in the southwest suburbs where I teach mostly on social welfare policy in the social work department.
Okay. And now you have a law background too, right?
Yeah, so I got into social work through my work as an attorney. I represented children in abuse and neglect courts, and got interested in what people know about child abuse and what people know about the systems that serve abused and neglected children, and that's kind of what led me into academia,
Okay.
and that's my research focus is in child serving systems.
So, a lot of background with vulnerable populations, which is obviously a topic that we're considering a lot these days.
Yeah, I mean, I was just before we had this conversation, chatting with a friend over Twitter um, about how really what's going on right now is highlighting so many kind of vulnerabilities in our society, right? And it's really calling attention to people without adequate healthcare, differences between rural and urban environments. I mean, there are just so many structural things about American society that the current moment gives us an opportunity to reflect on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to ask you a little bit more about that. But first, tell me a little bit more about your experience with St. Clement. You, your
Yeah,
wife, Monica. Tell us more.
great. So Monica and I were married at St. Clement. We just had our ninth wedding anniversary last week.
Yes.
We have um, daughters, Claire and Nora. Claire was baptized at St. Clement, and they're both at school in Clement in first grade and pre-K. So Monica and I, Monica's been going to Clement since 2005 or so. Um, I joined her when I moved in with her right as we got married.
And you usually attend the 8 o'clock where the
Yeah,
girls help out
we're
with
eight,
hospitality, right?
we're 8 o'clock. We're 8 o'clock, folks. Our girls are for better or for worse early risers. Better on school days because it's easy to get them out of the house. Worse on weekends because they're up at 6 o'clock. So we figure when you're up at 6 o'clock, you might as well get mass done. So we're there. We're there most Sundays at 8 a.m.
But you used to go to the seven, so you've seen some different iterations of Clement over the years.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we were in the choir at 7 p.m. before we had kids. Um, so yeah, so we've gone through
The
being
stages, young
youngish
adults.
adults to like real adults.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. So how are you and Monica and the girls, how are you staying connected with friends and family during this whole shelter in place?
Well, it's been sort of wacky, right? Because all of a sudden everything is virtual.
Mhm.
We try to have virtual play dates with with the girls' friends a couple times a week. We're Monica and I are members of a huge text group that has 20 people in it, and we send
Mm,
text all day.
mm.
Um, we're trying to work out ways to do our jobs remotely, right? We're on Zoom right now, so Zoom has become an important part of all of our lives at this
Yeah.
point. I have a semester that's ongoing right now,
Mm.
so I have classes that I'm trying to teach and figuring out ways to connect with students. So it's been an adventure, but it's been nice because it lets you sort of think intentionally about how you're trying to connect with people. Because the casual sort of happenstantial connections that you used to have out and about, right? You just don't have an opportunity for those now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly right, I think. And how are you and Monica, how are you balancing the like working the Zoom with two little girls at home, suddenly, the joys of homeschooling and all that? How are you striking that balance?
It's become busy, right? And it's nice because the girls are self-sufficient in lots of ways, right?
Mm,
But still, they're young, right? So there is a degree to which you need to be attentive to them when they're doing school. So Monica is trying to cope with figuring out how to work in her world, um, under the conditions of a pandemic, which is different, and so she's been quite busy. So it's been a lot of sort of just figuring it out as we go along. Um, like I try to take the primary responsibility in the mornings for getting the girls' schoolwork up and going, and we have a little bit of daddy school in the morning, and then we sort of free that up to sort of more electronic. The learning apps, they have some learning shows that they watch. They have some learning stuff that they do on YouTube that we try to push into the afternoon. That really gives me an opportunity to try to connect and work with my students. All the while to just sort of providing support, however and whenever she can, which is great. But again, just as we talked about before, right? Like we have two adults in the house with relatively flexible jobs that let us take care of this. Not everybody has that. And, the demands that this kind of situation places on people, it's really just apparent kind of in every hour of every day. Um, you know, because we're able and we have resources, both in terms of time and in terms of getting things connected. But it's still not easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you talking to the girls about this? Like, obviously they must have questions.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? The youngest one is in pre-K. She's 4, though she thinks she's 15. And a lot of the stuff that she talks about is missing her friends, and worrying about her friends. She's a person who's very loyal, so
Mm,
she's very worried about her
mm,
friends. Um, but I really didn't understand quite how much um, she picked on up on about what's going on, right? Um, she pays attention. She knows, right?
mm,
She understands that there's something happening out there where people are getting sick and that it's dangerous and it's dangerous enough for us to have to stay inside. Which I think is quite insightful for a 4.5-year-old, um, but not surprising because kids pay attention.
mhm,
So I think to answer your question, we try to be honest with them as possible, right? We try to sort of figure out what they're thinking and what they're feeling. They're scared. They pick up on the fact that we're nervous. We're nervous about the pandemic. We're nervous about our jobs. We're nervous about. I'm nervous about my students. My wife is nervous about her coworkers. So they pick up on that stuff. And there's really no way to handle it other than just to be as straightforward with them as possible and as reassuring as possible. It's like, look, we're doing these things to do everything that we can to keep not only us but everybody else healthy.
mhm. And what role does faith play in all this for you and Monica and the girls? How do you integrate faith into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I joked because you can, for Nora, especially the preschooler, right? You can count the number of times in her life that she's missed mass on a
Mm,
Sunday on one hand, right? So it was sort of an unusual circumstance trying to explain to her that, oh, wait, we're not going to church,
yeah, yeah.
2 weeks ago. Oh, we're going to watch church on TV. That was something that required an explanation. Um, but but it's important to, I think, again, use faith to kind of interrogate this, right?
Mm,
And not only
an
that,
interesting word. Yeah.
but use this pandemic to interrogate faith too,
Mm,
having it work both ways.
mhm,
And we try to do that, right? And we try to guide our children through that process of sort of thinking, okay, well, what does God mean to us in these days, right? And at the same time, right, like how is it that Catholicism, how is it that that thinking about the way that we should be treating our neighbors, how is it that thinking about the way that we should be operating a society on with that?
I think I may have, can you, do I still have you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Okay. Um, Yeah, so I had an interesting conversation with a friend, a fellow friend who works in the church, and his concern was that people would get so used to not coming to church that they would just not come back. They would realize maybe they didn't need it all that much. I personally, I can't speak to everyone. I think we're going to have an Easter moment on the other side of all this. I think people are going to show up in droves the first weekend that churches are open, because I think people are realizing how much they hunger for that in-person community that even Zoom and live stream just can't replace.
Yeah, I mean, so this is disclosing too much about myself, right? But like, I mean, I've been an internet user for a long time, and I've been member of several different internet communities, where I considered myself to be legitimate friends with people that I have never met, right?
Mhm.
So this is not somebody. This is not coming from somebody who's a luddite or who is not interested in sort of virtual communities, right? But you know I think that for me, you're right, right? Like one of the things that this has underscored, and I'm saying this sitting in my room, we haven't had contact with anybody outside of our household for the last 8 days,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Like, like humans are relational, humans are social, humans are communal, right? And that's one thing that the church really teaches and really emphasizes, and being able to be in communion, in community with other folks is super important to me. And of course, folks are welcome to discover the church in any way that they want to discover it, right? But I mean, something that I've been reflecting on a lot in this experience is kind of how important relationships are.
Mhm.
At Lewis, my university, right? One of our core values, core principal values, is association,
Mm.
and that's been a challenge in kind of thinking about how to design my classes. How do you get that sense of association? How do you get that sense of community? How do you get that sense of relationalness in this electronic form? And more power to the people who can, right? I mean, more power to the people that can. Um, but I'm making mistakes on that in trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I've worked at several universities over the years with college students. I've done parish work, and one of the most common questions I get is, "Could you record the session? I can't come. I can't come to the confirmation parent meeting. I can't make RCIA. Can you record it with video?" And over the years, I've just intransigently resisted it because of my belief that we are an incarnational church, and there's something about sitting across the table from someone face to face and flesh and blood, and being forced to encounter them in their totality and their humanness and their, maybe they smell a little bit because it's the end of a long day and they've been running around like crazy. And I do think that while we're being creative with some of these virtual gatherings, I do think that many people are having the opportunity, a kind of a forced opportunity, to reflect on what about showing up in person they really value from the church community. I want to pivot a little bit and not keep you too long. But with all of your work with vulnerable populations and with your experience, you just said you haven't left the house in 8 days to have contact with others. How do you think about, and how might others think about, this kind of dilemma, this challenge, question of we want to practice social distancing. We don't want to show up to the grocery store and put our hands everywhere. And yet we're concerned about the workers, the hourly workers, people who are being asked, who are now suddenly essential, Amazon delivery drivers, Grubhub. How do you process things like ordering from a local restaurant, wanting to support that business? Maybe you even know the owner, some of the employees. How are you, and Monica, how are you navigating all that?
Yeah, and I think that's a difficult question, and one that doesn't have an easy answer, right? I mean, really, just straightforward. I don't think that there's a right answer there. Okay, and sort of where I come at this from is my interest is in systems. My undergraduate degree is in population biology. I tend to see things kind of from a population perspective or from a systemic perspective.
Hmm.
Okay, and really, what we're looking for here in kind of achieving social distancing, right, is like, how is it that we can reduce the number of social contacts within the population to some level to slow the transmission of this disease, right? Um, so, of course, right, populations are made up of individuals.
Hmm.
So, population choices, in some way, right, are individual choices. And that's kind of where we're right, is that
I'm having trouble hearing you, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not
That's okay.
speaking. Are we losing or are we?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. Um, where we're thinking about this now
I lost you again. Um, yeah.
is it an
There.
internet connection thing? Do you think?
No, it sounded like with the speaker, but now I've got you clearly.
Oh, here we go. Maybe
Yep.
my thumb was on the
I
microphone.
think that might have been it. Yeah. Now we're good. Yeah. So back to
Yeah,
populations made up of individuals.
yeah. So populations are made up of individuals, right? So we have individual choices that go into that. And right now we're thinking, right, that really we're prioritizing trying to slow the spread of this disease. Now that's a balance, okay? Because you're right. We live in Andersonville. Okay, one of the things that's great about Andersonville is the local businesses that are here, right? Everybody who's on Clark Street, that's an independent bookshop and an independent restaurant. We take a lot of pride in that. You walk down Clark Street now, and those places are closed. You know, um, and we certainly don't want those businesses to go out of business, right? But again, like our personal moral choice right now is um, to reduce our social contacts in a way that we're slowing the spread as much as we can, because we can do that. And again, I don't know that that's the right answer. That's the answer that we've come to for our family, and we know that it's going to have consequences for people that we care about. Um, you know, so that's where we are.
So you are still making use of like delivery services and stuff like to support those restaurants, or no? No.
No,
Okay.
we're not.
Okay.
We're not right now.
Yeah. But like
And
you said, this is an individual choice, and everybody's going to kind of come at it from a slightly different way. How do
yeah,
you how do you think about some of the a lot of people right now are wrestling with their relationship with Amazon and some of the
mhm.
larger retailers, not the mom and pop bookstore in Andersonville. How do you think about that from a systems and individuals perspective?
Yeah, and it's wacky, right? Because, and I don't know what it's like where you are, but I mean, the street traffic here is FedEx and UPS,
Yep.
and that's it.
Yep.
I mean, there's not a whole lot else going on the street. Um, and we're trying to minimize ordering, right? Again, with the idea that we're trying to minimize social contacts, we're trying to you know um, limit our exposure and limit community exposure to us. At the same time, though, it's like, look, these are folks who are out there making minimum wage, doing deliveries,
Hmm.
um, who are being put at increased risk for this, right? Um, but at the same time, there's no structural option for them to not do the work that they have. I think this rolls back into what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, a couple of things earlier, right? One is there are no right choices here. I don't judge folks who are making use of delivery services, doing Amazon, going to the grocery store or Target. Like that's not something that I think is a moral evil, right? It's a prudential decision that you need to make about what's right for your family. But the other thing that it brings up too is this question about the precarity of how we handle work, right? And that's something that we try to intentionally think about in the house is, what does it mean for a UPS driver to be a UPS driver, or a delivery driver to be a delivery driver, or somebody working at a grocery store, or somebody who's working at a restaurant? What do these things mean to us and to society? How do we value these people, right? You know, in not only the ways that we um, use them, right, but also in the ways that they are part of, the system that allows life to happen, right? I think that there's lots of reflection going on about the value, right, the relative value of occupations now. And those are the ways that I would be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Again, not saying that there's going to be a right answer or a wrong answer, but how are we using this situation to interrogate the way that we interact with the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of jumping off that interrogation, I think for Catholics and Christians and persons of faith, it becomes an examination, right? An examination of conscience. And I think, one of the things I've been trying to help folks understand through things like adult theology classes is that the ethics of both the Hebrew scriptures and the gospel are inherently communitarian. The word we often translate into English as justice is rightness of relationship. What does it mean to be in right relationship with God, your neighbor, and yourself? And it always starts with the good of the whole community and not just the individual moral agent. And then it has repercussions for the individual. But the Matthew 25, I was hungry and you didn't feed me, can't be separated from why are there so many hungry people? It's not just an individual, you failed to take action. It's a communal. How did we allow this situation, this system, this population? One of the things I think that works very well for Catholics that want a practical exercise, since we're here in Lent and we're heading into Holy Week, and we weren't able to hold our communal reconciliation service, is an examination of conscience based on the scripture readings of our Sunday gospel, where Jesus is fundamentally redirecting our focus on members of our society, the man who's blind and laying at the pool, the woman who's at the well. These are people who live among us, but are not part of the society. They're not valued in the same way. And I think right now there's a whole lot more attention on these so-called essential employees that we are going to tell in 6 months, I'm sorry, but you're not eligible for healthcare benefits, or we can't afford a $15 minimum wage. So perhaps a practical exercise for Catholics based off your notion of interrogating faith and all this is heading into Easter season and into Triduum, examining our conscience, our complicity in these systems, and what are we going to specifically do on the other side of this to begin addressing those systems that say you're an essential employee during a pandemic to deliver Amazon packages, but you're not essential in terms of making sure you have access to basic medical care.
Well, one of the hardest things for me as a Catholic, right, in liturgy, right, is in the Passion, right. I always sort of resisted and hesitated when the congregation became the crowd,
Yeah.
right, especially when we're shouting "Crucify him,"
Mm-hmm.
right, and I think that that's another opportunity, right. On one side, so you've presented one set of readings that I think are really important for reflection, but I think that this is the other side too, is that to what degree are we the crowd who is supporting these systems that don't lead to justice for people who we really need in order to live the kinds of lives that we live.
Absolutely. And we could go on. We'll do that in our part two. John, thank you so much for taking this time today. And we're keeping you and your family in prayers. And we thank you for all that you do for our parish and for your students, and just wish you all the best.
Thank you, Michael.
All
Have
right.
a great day.
You too.